Hi there, my name's Sean Doherty. I just finished a 13-week bodybuilding cut for a show. In that time, I lost like 10% of my body weight. And to be successful in a fat loss phase, a weight loss phase, you got to meal prep. There's no getting around it. You have to pretty much know what you're eating at all times, and it's easy to do that if you made the food. So today, I'm going to give you 8 tips that I used on my cut. Now, first of all, these don't have to be used for just like a fat loss phase or a cutting phase. You can apply these to a maintenance phase or a bulking phase. They're just a little more useful when you're cutting and you're like a bit more constrained in what you can eat. Also, I'll be referring to a recipe that I made almost every single week on my cut called Peanut Turkey Stir Fry by this guy on YouTube named Josh Cordes. I'll leave a link to that in the description. I modified his recipe a little bit, but it's felt awesome. So, tip number 1 is to don't be complicated. Now, this means 2 different things. 1, your meals don't need to be complicated, especially on a cut, because that's really just like a short period of time, and you can just kind of deal with boring food. When you're on a cut, you kind of need to change your mentality and think about food more as fuel than as fun. So as an example, like sometimes my meal would literally just be ground beef with a little bit of hot honey on it and an apple. That was it. That was the whole meal. Super simple. I get my proteins and my fats from the ground beef. I get carbs and fiber and micronutrients from the apple. Super simple. What I also mean is like you don't have to reinvent the wheel every single week. You can make the same meals like pretty much every week, or make meals that are very similar and easy to modify. Like starting off, I would have like, ground turkey or ground beef with like rice. Well, as I cut down, lower the amount of rice. Eventually, no more rice, switch in lettuce, make a salad with ground beef, with ground turkey, stuff like that. And you don't have to have like a huge variety of things. Like if you looked at everything I ate for that 13 weeks, it could probably, like 90% of it could probably be reduced down to a list of about 20 things. I'm talking like, ground beef, ground turkey, rotisserie chicken, baked chicken, Greek yogurt, fruit, lettuce, peanut turkey stir fry, eggs and egg whites. I mean, that's just 10 right there. That list might be like 15. I don't know. What else? High fiber bread, high fiber wraps. You can do so much with a combination of all the things I just listed to make a variety of meals without making them like a huge difference. So that's tip number 1, don't complicate things. All right, tip number 2 is to get a blank cookbook. If you're anything like me, you have like a bunch of cookbooks around your house, and like maybe you've made like 2 or 3 recipes from this one, 2 or 3 recipes from that one. Or even worse, you're like me and you're on YouTube and Instagram all the time, and you see a recipe and like, oh, I'll save that for later. And then you don't know where it's at when it comes time to cook. So my recommendation is to get a blank cookbook. I got this blank cookbook off of Amazon, and I absolutely love it. Once I've made a recipe a couple times and I really like it, it goes in the blank cookbook. And this thing is great because has an index in it. You can write down exactly how long it takes to make, how difficult it is to make. Let me show you here. So here I have all the ingredients for the recipe, down to the weight of them. I have all of the tools that I use for the recipe. So this one says like large cooking pot, large skillet, knife, cutting board, 1 tablespoon, 1 teaspoon, scale, 2 cup measuring cup. So I know what all the tools are before I start cooking, so that as I'm cooking, I'm not like scrambling to find stuff. I get everything out. And then on the next page here, I'll list all the exact steps. There have been times I've cooked something out of a cookbook or something off YouTube, and I didn't really like how they did their order of operations, essentially. And so I'll write down what ends up being easiest for me. So it might be to start the rice first so that that's done cooking by the time I'm finished with the other stuff. Or it might be to make the sauce first because you kind of need to let that sit for a while, something like that. So that's a great tip, is to get a blank cookbook. Tip number 3 is to actually not use a cookbook at all and just memorize a recipe. With the peanut turkey stir fry, I made that probably 3/4 of the weeks out of each of my cuts last year and this year. I have it committed to memory. And I actually modified that a little bit. So you can't be afraid to change things to suit your own tastes. If you don't have to look through a cookbook, then it streamlines things. I mean, it's a super simple tip that I think can be applied to a lot of things. Like when I make the ground beef and the rice, I don't need a cookbook for that. You just brown the beef and you make rice and you mix it together. That's it. You're done. So that's tip number 3. Super simple tip. Just memorize everything. All right. Tip number 4 is to weigh everything you can. The worst part of meal prep, in my opinion, is the dishes. So if I can eliminate a dish, I will. Now, this does have slight limitations because if you're using a very small amount of something, it might not show up on your scale unless you have like a drug dealer scale or something like that, But it saves so much time. So for instance, with the peanut turkey stir fry, I have memorized all of the exact weights of all of those things. So I just put a bowl on a scale and I just put in the peanut butter powder, I put in the honey, sesame oil, all that stuff. And I just weigh it up. That saves me so much time later on. I don't have to clean a teaspoon. I don't have to clean a tablespoon. I don't have to clean a half tablespoon. I don't have to clean, a quarter cup. All I have to do is put a bowl in the dishwasher and I'm done, If your recipe doesn't list the ingredients by weight, what you can do is just as you make that recipe for the first time, get your tablespoon of whatever it is out, put that on a bowl and weigh that on the scale, and then write it down in your cookbook. So that's tip number 4, weigh everything. Tip number 5 is actually one of my favorites to do, and that's to break up your meal prep. Sometimes I don't have time, I don't have an hour to make an entire meal. I don't have an hour and a half to make this thing, but I might have 20 minutes to cut up some vegetables. Or I might have 10 minutes to mix up some spices for, the marinade later. Or I might have time to just trim my chicken thighs to get all the fat off of that. And this can kind of save you a lot of time in the long run because, if you just like watching TV or something, you can just chop up some vegetables. You can mix up some spices while you're doing that. And then later on, when you need to focus on like other parts, like make sure you don't burn the chicken or burn the meat and stuff like that, you don't overboil something, that's when you can really, use more time to focus on those things. Just chop up some vegetables, put them in some Tupperware, put them in the fridge, mix up some spices, put them in a little bowl, put some saran wrap over it, or a marinade, something like that, That's one of my favorite things to do, is to just chop up vegetables, and the next day, it's so much less to do. So that's tip number 5, break up your meal prep. All right, step number 6 is all about kitchen tools. Getting things, utensils, items in the kitchen that will just make things easier. For instance, this is a ground beef chopper. I just got this recently. I wish I would have gotten this years ago. This makes breaking up your ground beef so much easier and so much smaller. Like you can get the ground beef or the ground turkey or whatever ground meat you're using. You can get it so much smaller and with so many fewer chops. Another thing is to get a nice knife. I had some fairly cheap kitchen knives, and then I got this one. A real chef would laugh at this knife. It was like $100 off Amazon, but it is the sharpest knife I own, and it makes cutting up vegetables, cutting up meat a lot easier. And then my other favorite kitchen tool is right here, and it's a huge cutting board. This thing is really big. When you're cutting up vegetables, if you have more space, it just makes it easier. You don't have to think about keeping the vegetables on the cutting board as much because there's so much room. I will say though that if this was any bigger, I would not be able to fit it in my sink. So before you go out and you buy a huge cutting board, make sure it's going to fit in your sink. When I clean this thing, I have to put it in diagonal, and then it won't even fit in the drying side of my sink, so I have to dry it pretty much right then and put it away. But yeah, so that's tip number, what are we on? We're on 6? Yeah, we're on tip number 6. Get some kitchen tools that will streamline the process. Okay, tip number 7 might be controversial. When I think of meal prep, I think of just having food ready that you know what is in it. So during my cut, I ate a lot of the Just Bare chicken chunks. I used up a lot of frozen vegetables, canned vegetables, stuff like that. There's these rotisserie chicken strips that they sell at Costco. You throw those in the air fryer. They're really good. Even though you didn't prep the food is ready for you to put together, So like the VT has these things of rice that are really good. So I'll like put a thing of rice in the microwave, then I'll put some, chicken chunks in the air fryer, mix those up, bam, I have a meal now, I didn't quite meal prep it, but I had food that was ready that I knew what was in it. I knew what the macros were ahead of time so that, when I put it together, I didn't have to guess. And finally, tip number 8 is one I actually didn't use, but I think a lot of people might, and that's to use a meal prep service like Factor or HelloFresh. I'm not even familiar with HelloFresh. They might be one of those meal services that sends you all the ingredients. I'm not even sure. Another option is Clean Eats. There's a Clean Eats in my city. And I went there and I got some meals and they were fine, but they were a little more than I wanted to spend for how good that they were. But if you absolutely hate cooking, just have someone do it for you. I've even seen people, get like catering trays from restaurants that, have all this food pre-made and they just, divide it up individually. That's something I haven't really looked into or done, but it could be pretty cost effective. But yeah, that is the 8 meal prep tips that I use to make as many of my meals as I can, so that I could get absolutely shredded for a bodybuilding show. So if you have any kitchen utensils, if you have any tips, anything, leave it in the comments below. Thank you for watching.